service providers in the city of Fairfield over the last couple decades, but what we're hearing from even them is that they cannot continue to provide services without increasing their prices. So it just isn't making financial sense for them to be able to pay their employees, purchase supplies, etc. And we do have other providers in the city as well, and we're getting the same message from them, as well as this message from our counterparts in other cities. So in fiscal year 2021, there was some staff turnover, and as the new staff was taking a look at the budgets and doing projections for 4 and 5 and 6 years out, what we discovered is that this district in particular was facing about a $50,000 deficit by fiscal year 24-25. So that's just about a year and a half from now is what we're looking at. So at the time that was discovered, staff took immediate action to mitigate that issue. This, again, I'm not going to go through every line item on here, but this is the budget for the proposed district. The proposal to generate additional funding, I should back up, sorry. Generate additional funding in this current district is to create a new overlay district with essentially the same boundaries and providing the same services, just with an increased assessment rate. Sarah will go over in her presentation why we're proposing a new district as opposed to just increasing assessments in the current district. So the current budget, while it does include an increase in assessment rates, it also includes a $29,000 contribution from the general fund. So right now we're at about 13, so that's going to increase to about $29,000 per year. In addition to that, the city owns, I think, 1 or 2 parcels here in this district. So as with Prop 218 rules, again, Sarah will get into that in just a moment, the city will be paying $1,800 in assessments for the city-owned parcels within the district. This new budget also includes adequate funding to open up the opportunity to more bids from other quality landscapers that might want to do business here in the city of Fairfield but haven't had an opportunity to because our policy has changed from low bidding now to qualifications based. And finally, this budget will also have room for contingencies and reserves, something that we've technically had in the past, but as seeing costs go up, we're not going to have room for if we continue with this district. Finally, I want to say that this budget represents the max rates, or the max budget possible, not necessarily the actual budgets that will happen going forward. And as we collect enough reserves and as we have a comfortable amount for capital replacements and any unexpected expenditures, we'll go ahead and that will drop off what we're actually collecting in assessments as well. So your assessments will go down based on that. So that concludes my presentation. Go ahead and pass the mic off to Sarah.
All right, hopefully we can get this. I think you all can hear me. Hopefully we can pick it up on the recording as well. My name is Sarah Mears, director with NBS. NBS is a consulting firm that helps cities and other local government agencies with secured financing districts like this assessment district. And we, this is the space that we work in. This is the work that we do day in and day out. And this is our primary service that we provide. It's a very, very niche industry. And I've been working in this space for a little more than 20 years. So tonight we'll go over a few things. We'll cover methodology. I'm trying to stand out of the way so everyone can see the slides. We'll cover the methodology. We'll talk about general and special benefit. That's a key component of the engineer's report. We'll identify the improvements, and in this case, it's the street trees and landscaping. We'll look at the budget and the assessments, so we'll cover the cost estimate as well as the assessment rates. And then we'll talk about the formation process, how that works, what the steps are, what the proposed schedule is, and what the ballot procedure looks like, because there is, the city has no ability to collect additional money from property owners in this assessment without your approval as property owners. Next slide. So methodology is really important. This process is governed by Article 13D of the Constitution, Section 4, otherwise known as Proposition 218. That was a voter initiative that was placed on the ballot in 1996 and approved by voters. So that section was added to the Constitution, and it outlines what assessments are. Now, assessments themselves actually date back to the early 1900s, but this gave us additional information and additional framework that we have to comply with. While it does give us a framework to follow, it does give us criteria we have to operate in, it is not prescriptive, meaning it doesn't tell us exactly how to accomplish the things that it wants us to do. So we have to figure that out as professionals in this industry with the experience that we have, and we also look to the courts, right? When law is unclear, we get lawsuits. The courts then clarify that law for us. So we look to some of those legal cases to take additional guidance in terms of what the laws actually mean. First thing we have to do is identify the improvements to be maintained. So in this case, it's the landscaping. We'll see the map here in just a second. We need to determine what the maintenance cost estimate is. So, what is that ideal level of service that, that would maintain the landscaping to a satisfactory condition? We identify the parcels that benefit from those improvements, and we separate general and special benefit. We'll talk about a little bit more what exactly those terms mean. They are terms that were added to the Constitution with Proposition 218. We then allocate proportional special benefit to all of those parcels in the assessment district, and we calculate the assessments to be levied. So this map shows you where the landscaping is in green there on the map. And I know you have a map in the engineer's report, but in black and white, it might be a little bit more difficult to see there. So that green area shows you the landscaping. You have 231 street trees and approximately 235,000 square feet of landscaping that is being maintained. In terms of the methodology, we have to identify special benefit. And that is what benefit is conferred to property in the assessment district by virtue of these improvements being maintained. So for these landscaping improvements, we've identified improved aesthetics and increased livability as the special benefits that are conferred to property. And then we have to allocate that special benefit proportionately to parcels in the district. So we're looking at a variety of factors, such as land use, building square footage, lot square footage or lot size, and average daily trip generation, which is also based on land use. We have to separate general benefit. So we talked about what special benefit is. Special benefit is that benefit that accrues to parcels within the district. General benefit is benefit that accrues to the public at large. So if someone were to drive through the district and enjoy the beautiful landscaping, but they're not associated with any property in the district, that would be considered general benefit. So in this case, we're looking at pass-through traffic as the method to quantify general benefit. So there are a variety of types of streets in the district. You have local streets, right, where the homes are. And then you have some other streets. You have, of course, Hillborn, Waterman. Those are much larger streets. And so we're looking at those streets and identifying the amount of pass-through traffic that is generated on those streets. And then we're looking at the share of the improvements that are along local streets versus those higher traffic streets, and calculating a weighted average to determine how much of the share of cost is general benefit. The amount that we determine as general benefit cannot be charged to property owners in the district. It is paid for by a general fund contribution that is paid by the city. So again, we have to separate those two things. We take the budget, allocate a share to special benefit, a share to general benefit. Only special benefit is what's charged to property owners. So in this case, it's 18.3%. That's the dollar amount that Chris mentioned in terms of the share of the general benefit calculation. So this is the budget. Chris mentioned 180,000, so this is a little bit more detail on what's being provided in that. In terms of the landscape maintenance, tree maintenance, weed abatement, et cetera. She mentioned the portion that is available for contingency and reserves, really just ensuring that this district is set up for the long term, making sure that there is sufficient funding over time to maintain these improvements. So now we have to figure out the assessment rates. We've identified that general benefit. We've identified the special benefit. So we take that total budget of just under $180,000. We apply that general benefit percentage to that number. And so we're taking that $29,000 off the top. That's that general fund contribution by the city. So we determine that there's approximately $151,000 that is special benefit, and that's what's assessed to property owners in the district. So in total, that $151,000, and we're going to assign special benefit points to each property. So I mentioned that the special benefit has to be allocated proportionally to parcels in the district. So we're looking at those factors I mentioned, which is land use, property, lot size, building size, and average daily trips, to come up with a point system that would relate parcels in the district to each other and allocate that special benefit proportionately. So there are a variety of land uses in the district. On average, single-family residential would pay $605. You can go to civicmike.com to see what your current assessment is, because there is that current district that's in place. You can see the last 2 years of actual assessment that is on your property tax bill, and then you can see the proposed assessment under the new district. We also assess publicly owned property. That is a provision of Proposition 218, and there is a publicly owned parcel in the district. So that parcel would pay their proportionate share of special benefit in terms of the assessment. And we're also charging undeveloped property as well, so you can see those rates there. So formation process. I mentioned this is not something that can go through without your input. So Proposition 218 is very, very clear on this fact. There has to be what's called an assessment ballot proceeding, or a protest ballot proceeding, wherein every property owner will receive a ballot. This is not a registered voter vote. This is unlike a typical election where you would vote for president or mayor or whoever. This is a completely different process that's outlined under Prop 218. So every property owner receives a ballot. That ballot is weighted according to the financial obligation of that property owner. So if you have a higher assessment amount because it's determined that your benefit is greater, then your ballot is weighted higher than someone who has a lower assessment amount. So if my ballot, my assessment is $100, and Chris has a ballot and her assessment is $200, her ballot is worth twice as much as mine. We're going to, when we tabulate the ballots returned, we're going to add up the weighted dollar amount, right, of every ballot returned. We're going to add up those in opposition. We're going to add up those in favor. If the in favor amount is greater than the in opposition amount, the district is able to be approved. If the in opposition column tallies higher by that weighted assessment amount, we have a majority protest and we cannot move forward. So that's your participation in the process through that approval, is casting your ballot. In terms of timing, we're looking at April 18th for the council to consider the resolution of intention. That's where the preliminary engineer's report would be considered by council and approved. Following that date, the ballots would be mailed. They must be mailed at least 45 days prior to the public hearing date. The public hearing would be held on June 6th, and those ballots would be tabulated the following day on June 7th. And there would be a special council meeting on June 7th to announce the results of the ballot tabulation. So you would know, pass or fail.
Thank you, Sarah. All right, so now it is time for question and answers. Thank you all for bearing with us through our technology difficulties. We truly appreciate the understanding. We know that it can deter some of the information. So if you have any questions, even about things that Sarah talked about, please feel free to ask us to reiterate. And again, thanks for bearing with us. So, all right, so we are going to go for questions. Go ahead and raise your hand if you have one. And I saw one, and then we'll do two, and then we'll go from there. I'm going to ask you to ask your question into the microphone.
How many parcels are in the district?
The question was how many parcels are in this district? 262.
Thank you. And then we will go over here. Now the mic is working great.
I actually have 3 questions, but I can take another turn. So one of the questions I had is that you did mention that it's as a separate assessment. Did you say something about it has to be put on as a separate assessment and put it on top of the one that we already have, or replace it?
So this assessment would replace the current assessment that is on the tax roll. It would not be in addition to. And so Chris, I think, maybe has an additional comment about that, but this district would be intended to replace the existing district to come into compliance with Proposition 218, which obviously was adopted in 1996 after the district was formed. So now we have a new district. That's why we can't just increase assessments, so to speak. We have to now compliance. In order to collect any additional dollars, we have to be in compliance with those provisions. So we have to form a new district.
And all I wanted to add on to that is, while that is true that this district will be replacing the proposed district will be replacing the existing district as the service provider, we do have to leave the existing district in place for 5 years. So I mentioned in my presentation that the city provided this district with a $28,000 loan to kind of get us through this period while we are, this study money and those services throughout this year while we were going through this process. So that $28,000 with the over 5 years at 0%, $5,000 per year. So if this proposed district is approved by the voters and council approves the district, then you'll see 2 assessments on your tax bill. One for this district, the existing district, just to repay the loan, and then one for the new district to provide services. For, in front of council to dissolve the existing district, and that, because all the obligations under that district would have been met.
So for 5 years, it's the amount we will pay plus the
No, sorry, and I didn't mention that either. District will be reduced to only the amount needed to pay the loan. So 5,000 divided by, yeah, it's like 20 something dollars. Sorry, I didn't mention that.
Our assessment yearly is $195, and then I saw something up there for $605, I think it was. Is that the new rate?
Correct. On average, so again, I mentioned that there are many factors that go into the assessment. It is not a flat rate per parcel as it was in the past, because we're now complying with Proposition 218. The assessment amount for each parcel may differ. The average amount for single family was the 605, I think, that you saw on the screen. And if you would like you're correct that the $195 is what you would see on civicmy.com as the assessment per parcel for the last.
Yes, so that, Sarah, there was an average, and so definitely based off of what your parcel is.
Right, that listing in the engineer's report is specific to your parcel, where my number was an average of all of the single family, which again differ by the lot size and building square footage and so forth.
What determines how much for each parcel? Is it based on the size of the property?
The land use, so we have 3 land uses in the district. It's the single family residential, undeveloped property, and public property. So we look at land use and average daily trips associated with that land use. Average daily trips comes from the Institute of Traffic Engineers. Then we look at building size and lot size as the other 2 components of the calculation that go into the analysis. The lot size is included in the calculation. So if there's a single house on a 7-acre parcel, the lot size and the building square footage from that property, that single assessor parcel, are both included in the calculation.
And Sarah, can you explain kind of how it all works together, to try to balance that out?
Yeah, so that's why we're looking at multiple factors as we create the assessment engineering. Proposition 218 doesn't tell us exactly how to identify special benefit, calculate general benefit, identify the proportional special benefit, and allocate that to properties. But we do have guidance from several court cases that talk to us about how it's important to look at a variety of factors for each parcel, so that if you only look, for example, at lot square footage, or say front footage, if we looked just at front footage along the landscaping, or something of that nature, you could have 2 very similar parcels, and just because their frontage might be sort of small on the front or very large on the front, but they are exactly the same size, they would be treated very differently. And so, that's why we're using a variety of calculations, a variety of factors that go into that calculation.
So what happens if people vote against this? And we end up at $195 a year, you guys can't pay for the maintenance costs? What is the solution at that point?
Yes, I think it pretty much you got it on. You got it right on. So the existing district is still viable, still alive. So we would put the annual assessments to council's approval in June, as we do every year. So approved every single year. They would be approved at $195, and whatever revenue we can pull in with that, then we would provide landscaping services with that amount of revenue. But of course, as these costs are increasing, then the amount of services will obviously decrease over time. We would also still have to pay the $28,000 loan, at that $5,000 per year. So it would kind of compound it a little bit, especially for that first 5 years.
A while ago, you talked about the general public having access, like on Waterman and Hillborn, where that adds to the value. Every Friday, especially, and usually every evening, Vista Grande has got thousands of cars going up and down there. So they have value as well. Is that in the calculation?
Let's see which, so we looked specifically at Hillborn and Waterman for purposes of this analysis. Can you show me on the map where Vista Grande is? So when we did the analysis relative to the pass-through traffic, we did a couple of things. We looked at the city's traffic travel demand model, and it looked at how streets were classified according to their functional classification of the street. So so streets can be local, collector, arterial, et cetera. And, and what I'm hearing may be that there is some traffic that is going down a street that is not maybe supposed to, given the functional classification of the street. And so, I don't know if anyone from the city has any comments about the change to functional classification or, something like that. But, yeah, it sounds like that's what's happening. So again, the data sources. So this is where we're looking at Hillborn and Waterman, and we're identifying that the pass-through traffic for those two is almost 49%, and then applying that as a weighted average to the number of improvements or volume of improvements that are on those streets versus the local streets.
I live on Vista Grande and I don't have any landscaping at all, so I mean, what's the difference? The city doesn't pay for any landscaping in front of my house either. But I mean, I see what you're saying. I think the calculation accounted for the unused space. It's not they have a bigger parcel, but most of it's unused.
We are looking at the lot size as a portion of the calculation. So we are, so obviously a 7-acre parcel that is significantly larger than any of the additional, the other single-family residential that's more, tract subdivision residential down at the bottom that is probably, a 50 by 100-ish foot lot, is due to that lot size that does increase the assessment.
You see the green part that goes kind of diagonally? Mm-hmm. Right here.
It stops here.
Okay. So that open space in the summer, in the spring, or late spring, has been cut. They cut it back every year. But in this thing here, it shows it ends right in the middle, and my property is toward the end, up further. So
There's not going to be any fire control here.
we're concerned about, who's going to keep, because I also read in that strip right along Vista Grande, that was supposed to be kept up, and it has not been. The weeds are 4 feet tall, but so that looks crappy. But I'm concerned about the fire danger that's up in that green belt.
Okay, so
Sorry, Chris, can you repeat the question for the video?
yeah, no problem. So as I understand it, the question is why is basically this green area right here in the middle? You say it stops right before it gets to the large parcel right in the middle here. I'm sorry? But in reality, It's always cut. Okay, so some of it, okay. And did you also mention that right here along Vista Grande, there's also some weed abatement happening here? Yeah, yeah. So everything here in green is what's funded by the district. If there's any other weed abatement happening outside of the green area, it's likely funded by the general fund. So not to say that it's not happening, it's just not being funded by the district. And all weed abatement throughout the city is managed in some form, or at least directed by our fire marshal. And there's a whole annual program that the whole city gets evaluated, and weed abatement happens on an annual basis. So that it doesn't mean it's not happening, it's just probably the LLMD is not paying for it. So if anybody has anything to report, not just landscaping, but I mean street issues, potholes, street lights, anything like that, we do have a portal on our City of Fairfield website that you can go to make that report. So if you go to, well, I won't do it now, but if you go to the City of Fairfield website, there's a tab at the top that says, How do I? And then a drop down, when you click on that, there's a drop down menu that says report an issue or something to that effect, report an issue. And then from there, there's a whole menu of things that you can report. And then, so that right there, is that the app? Thank you, I was gonna mention the app too. So you could also download an app for easier access to where, if you're out and about on the city, you can just pull up the app and report it right then and there. You could take pictures and attach pictures so we know exactly what you're talking about. I don't know if there's a GPS pin. Probably not. That's probably oh, there is. Okay, great. We're coming up to the 21st century.
It's an order number that you can watch, and everybody can see it.
They
so it's
are
not
very
like-
responsive to issues, like if you find trash has been dumped, like a couch or whatever, or if the curb needs to be painted, like.
I do want to mention too that that we will post this information on civicmike.com/Fairfield. So if you are not signed up, I highly recommend you sign up. Or I will also give you my number to call if you need help finding it or anything.
I just wanted to add to on the fire abatement areas. I just wanted to add on the fire abatement areas in the open space areas that typically get mowed once a year. With all the rains still happening, our fire department is monitoring the conditions. They are aware that the weeds are really high right now. They're still green, which is good, and so just their abatement efforts are going to be a little bit later in the year than typical, compared to the last few years. It is expensive to do it throughout all the areas in the city, so we don't want to do it twice. They're monitoring it, and so that they can schedule it for the right time for this season.
Thank you, Paul. All right. So I think we have 3, 4. Oh, you don't. Okay. Then we'll go 3.
Okay, so kind of related to the question I was asking about before, if people vote against this, because I mean, with inflation the way it is, it seems likely that, and clearly they voted against it the last time this was up for increase. What has it been looked into, like where we could reduce, like I can't remember if there's any grass, but that takes a lot of water and a lot of maintenance. I know that the stuff on Hillborn is ivy, so still takes water, but probably not as much maintenance. Like, have we looked at alternatives to replace the grass at least with something that's less maintenance and irrigation heavy that could reduce the costs? I know that would be a capital improvement, but it could reduce the ongoing maintenance costs. And so I was wondering if that's been looked into.
So I've been with the city for 3 years. I can say that at least with the LLMDs, no, we haven't looked into any serious projects like that. It will be something we will have to look into, especially if this district is not formed, or if the new district is not formed. We will be looking to the community to help, develop what ideas we should be, what ideas you guys have, what kind of landscaping you guys want. I know a lot of people are going towards drought tolerant, but as you already mentioned, that's kind of like already a capital replacement project that would cost money, but I'm sure there's some sort of happy medium we can come to where it's not so irrigation heavy. There's also a landscape committee that was recently approved by the city of Fairfield. Now this is a citywide landscape committee, so we wouldn't just be focusing on LLMDs, but we would also probably be looking to that committee for ideas and direction on which way we want to go if the district isn't formed. There's an opportunity to join that. I think that applications will be somewhere around July, if you guys are interested.
One other quick I wanted to mention is that if the existing assessment or current assessment, that $195 had an inflator built in back when it was formed in 1986, right? It would be just over $400 today. So just as a point of comparison, if there had been an inflator, you would be paying about $400 right now versus what you are paying and would have been paying, obviously, slightly increased amounts each year. And as compared to the on average, roughly $600 for on average for single family.
On the calculation of the votes, is it just the people that vote, or?
Yes, it is just the ballots returned that are tabulated.
Yes, and I do want to mention, though, that this is just a portion of the engagement that we're doing. We're also going to do, we're also doing virtual. There are pop-up meetings. There's thecivic.com. So, different people find their information in different ways, and so I just want to put that out there. So either way you want, your hopes aren't up or down. Question?
Just for clarification, the improvements or what's going to be maintained is only the green spots? Is that right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, those green spots on the map are what would be maintained by this
Okay, so our property that we have is not being maintained by this district then? Are you saying that we're supposed to be maintained by the city?
Your personal property?
Right. You see where
the city doesn't provide
that pyramid up at the
maintenance
top
on
there.
private property.
Yeah, pardon?
The city doesn't provide the maintenance on private property.
Well, I'm talking about
unless
the
there's an easement
frontage.
for
I'm
the
talking
easement.
about right by the sidewalk.
We've been there 30 years and we've never had a
Yeah.
So I think the landscaping does not extend.
Anybody's, and none of that space that is being maintained is anybody's frontage anyway. Like all those homes on Vista Grande and all the courts and all the stuff on Tengate, those aren't in front of people's homes either.
Well, I know, but
all that stuff is all on the backside of everybody's homes, on the corner of Waterman and all that stuff. And only that strip that goes up Vista Grande, you can't even see it from the homes. It's literally a hill slope, but it's not maintained. It's just being left.
Well, the difference being our property, that's not our frontage property, is on a street. It's on Hillborn, Vista Grande.
I got that, but our frontage property, like all my neighbors on Vista Grande, each and every one of them, none of their frontage has any support either. That's what I'm trying to say. Yes, you have a large parcel of property, and yes, you're on a major street, and it doesn't have any improvements. Nobody's home on any of this property. Nobody's home has frontage.
I'm gonna hold it.
Yeah, I'm sorry, it's not a question. I'm just comparing apples to apples here.
No, I appreciate it.
Okay, so the only other question I had is about the annual increases. So I think from reading this that it's not just stopping at the amount that has been calculated for us, that you can raise it every year if needed.
Correct.
And then you also mentioned something about it could be less. Like when is a scenario where it would be less, and how do there's no requirement for us to vote to make it go up. It's you have the right to do that without a vote, right?
Correct. By approving the assessment through the ballot process now, what you are approving is the rate that is being set for the 23-24 fiscal year, but you are also approving an annual inflator. The annual inflator is linked to the consumer price index up to a maximum of 3%. So right now, CPI is much higher, right? It's been, 7-8% over the last, several months. And last couple of years, prior to that, it had been much lower. But this is limited to a 3% maximum increase on an annual basis. So whatever amount you see today, that maximum assessment can increase by up to 3% a year. If CPI is less than 3%, it would be less than 3%. So on an annual basis, as Chris mentioned, there is an annual engineer's report that goes before council. This already happens with the existing district. It will continue to happen with the new district if approved. And the budget is set at that time. through that annual engineer's report. So one of the things that Chris talked about was that collection for reserve or contingency. Once that reserve bucket is filled, and I think it was about $14,000 roughly of the total budget, once that bucket is filled and there's no need to collect that $14,000, the budget that is collected on an annual basis would be reduced by that amount. So rather than levying the maximum assessment for that year, the levy that shows up on your property tax bill would be less than the maximum assessment proportionate to your maximum. So, it's just a prorated calculation. If you need 80% of the budget or 90% of the budget, we would be charging 90% of the maximum assessment to your parcel. But again, that goes to council on an annual basis. There's a public hearing and so forth associated with that each year.
This is a general question, it's not personal. So what if it doesn't pass? What will happen? I mean, they'll mow the grass once a month, or, what's going to be cut? What kind of maintenance will be cut?
So while we don't have specifics, what we would have to do is speak to a landscaper to give us a quote on what specifically they could provide for the amount of money we have available to us. For the $50,000 that we're looking at, potentially only having in this district on an annual basis, to put it in perspective, the water bill was $40,000 last year. You know what I mean? So you're either going to get watering, but we're not going to be able to mow the grass. You know what I'm saying? Or we're going to be able to water about half the time and maybe get mowing once a month. So those are just examples. Of course, I can't be sure until we get a quote from an actual landscaper, but $50,000, unfortunately, I just don't think there's going to be, we'll be able to get that much for that price.
Okay, I just want to confirm also that pathway that goes from Vista Grande to Waterman with the eucalyptus trees, that's not part of this parcel.
No, and I'm sorry, I'm looking to our operations team because they're at the field, and that's correct, yes.
Okay. So really, I mean, it looks like we need to potentially find a way to reduce irrigation and grass potentially down the road to get this to work if this doesn't happen, is what it sounds like to me.
And we mentioned what could we do to reduce the cost if the district doesn't pass. We can still look into that if the district does pass. I mean, we'll have more funds available to us at that time. So I think, either way, let's really take a look at that in the coming years to make sure that we're using our money wisely.
I can speak out loud. First of all, I want to... Okay. I'm really happy with the landscaping that's in there, and I think it does an asset. But I mean, nobody wants to pay more money, but I think it is an asset to our community. Just wanted to say that.
Thank you for your
I
input.
would agree. I would just say that we're in a drought and we should consider that.
Well,
I mean, it doesn't feel like we're in a drought.
I'm kind of an aside, and I'll just try to speak up to the camera. Do we know, any of you know of any opportunities for state or federal grants that may assist in the hardscape change of properties like this or districts like this? Does anybody know of any such programs?
I'm not aware of any at the moment, no, and I'm looking to the team. I don't think we have anything at the top of our heads, yeah.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Wonderful. If you leave tonight and you're in the car and you say, oh man, I forgot the 10 questions I was going to ask, please contact at civicmike.com. You can email us. You can also find this information at civicmike.com/Fairfield. And always feel free to call us as well. Do you have the number off the top of your head for the 1-800 number?
Do you want to write it down? 1-800-676-7516 is the phone number you can dial.
Thank you. Sarah's been here a really long time. Say it one more time.
The number is 1-800-676 7516.
I also
And-
wanted to, oh, sorry.
I was just going to say, you can ask for Michelle directly, and that will send you directly to me, and I will gladly help you answer all of your questions.
So I just wanted to mention on the back, stapled to that blue flyer right there on the table is a list of pop-up meetings that we'll be having. There's I don't know, maybe 6 or 7 of them left that we'll be having just throughout the city. I think the next one is Friday morning at Starbucks. So if you guys want to have a cup of coffee, ask a couple questions. Someone from our staff will be at any one of these pop-up meetings. We'll also have one here at the park one of these days. It's on the schedule. That schedule is also available online, but if you wanted to take one with you before you leave, you can do that too.
Well, thank you, Chris. All right. Well, thank you for coming.